Introducing your hosts from Collingwood, Ontario, Canada, Jack Edwards, and his partner from Dallas, Texas, by way of Port Arthur, Texas, Big George. Together, they are the North-South Connection.
Ladies and gentlemen, how's it going? Welcome to 5 Count. I'm Jack Edwards alongside Big George. He's big in Canada, big in Texas, allegedly.
Allegedly.
Big in Texas.
Look, don't ask nobody back home about me because they don't know nothing about me. I guarantee it.
We won't go to Port. We won't go to Port Arthur.
Don't do it.
So, ladies and gentlemen, it's a special night for us. A special guest is joining us. You heard that opening. The voice of that opening is with us alongside. He's also the voice of Rock Solid Wrestling, the promotion that I work for up here in Ontario. He is Adam Content. Adam, thank you for joining us.
Hey guys, thank you so much for having me on the show. Grooving a little bit to that intro, a great way to start the night off.
Always.
And I'm very excited to talk our topic tonight, something that is near and dear to my heart, as I know it is to yours, Jack. And Big George, man, what a pleasure to finally meet somebody who's more Canadian than your broadcast partner. That's wonderful.
I have a great sense of where wrestling comes from and how it's done. So I'm not going to say nothing about who picks what and when they do it. I just pick the best of the best when the best is asked for. So.
Well, hey, speaking of the best, just to have a little extra Canadian representation today, I brought a Bret Hart Shaker Cup there. You know, Bret Hart, founder of the Hart Foundation, one of the greatest Canadian groups of all time. Jack, you wouldn't know anything about that, but your buddy Big George would, for sure.
Listen. I had to spend a lot of time with Bret. We talked hockey. I ran a red light. He was happy about that. Spilt water on him at lunch. And then got to meet his brother Smith, too, the same day.
Notice he didn't say, I also apologized profusely to the point of annoyance. See, if you were a real Canadian, you would have also mentioned that as well.
Hey, I drove Bret Hart to a military base. There's nothing more Canadian than that. He did, as part of his deal. He did when he was here, he met with the Special Olympics in the morning. We had lunch. And then he went to talk to the soldiers. He was beat. He left earlier than we expected, but he signed for like an hour and a half. And like people were crying when he was there, like legit tears from grown men. I'm like, it was wild. But anyway, off Bret Hart, onto broadcasters. Now, the reason why we brought Adam on, I asked Adam to come on, is Adam is a play-by-play announcer for Rock Solid Wrestling when we do any sort of TV or unsanctioned series. Now, cheap plug, rocksolidfanclub.ca. It's our website or app where you can get to all of our content. You can hear our unsanctioned show, which I'm on and Adam is on. Adam does the play-by-play. There's probably a bunch of other stuff Adam does. So, and Adam is a great play-by-play guy, and I was his color commentator. He's great. He, like working with me, he's that anchor on him. But so I wanted to bring Adam on here because this is a topic near and dear to my heart. George, you've heard this before. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a broadcaster. That was what I wanted to do. And I idolized two guys, Bob Cole and a gentleman who will be mentioned on this list. So, and I just like knowing about broadcasters. So, Adam, did you always want to be a broadcaster?
No, of course not. I wanted to be a wrestler. Come on. Every kid wants to be a wrestler when they're growing up and watching Hulk Hogan body slam Andre the Giant, man. But of course, reality hit me pretty hard in the face about 5 minutes into my actual wrestling career. Although, having a love for broadcasting was always kind of there. I wanted to be an actor when I was a kid. I wanted to be in theater and movies and things of that nature. And the truth of the matter is that I think whenever a person gets into that kind of performing arts, they want to be a storyteller. And at the heart of it, play-by-play announcers in professional wrestling are storytellers. They are the narrators of the story that you are watching. They are guiding you through so that if you're turning on your television set one day and you are like me and you see Hulk Hogan taking on Dino Bravo and you have no idea who these guys are, well, then the voices coming through that television set are going to let you know, well, this is Hulk Hogan and here is why you should cheer this hero. And that's Dino Bravo. And here are the reasons why he is the nastiest, meanest guy you'll ever meet, and you should hate his guts. And the broadcasters that you listen to in pro wrestling, they are performers. There is an element of performance to it, regardless of what anyone will tell you. And there are some names that will probably be mentioned tonight that will lean more towards sports broadcaster than they will storyteller. However, at the heart of it, that is what they are doing, because pro wrestling, as we all know, whether you consider it sports or entertainment or a combination of both, is very unique. And it's very different from any other sport or entertainment out there. So that's really a long-winded way of me saying, no, I wanted to be a wrestler growing up, but broadcasting became something that came very natural to me. As you can see, I can string a couple words together without taking a breath. So that was an advantage that I had once I realized that my body wasn't built for between the ropes, but my mouth was built for outside of it. Take that however you will.
Yeah, I was the same way. I mean, once I I was athletic as a mattress, I wasn't getting in. So George, you'll watch wrestling for a long time. Like, do you always? How important is good broadcasting? Like, how important are the broadcasters to you?
When I first started watching wrestling, I didn't know what I was watching. Kind of what the example Adam kind of gave. It's like you really don't know what you're looking at when you first turn the channel, because none of my family members immediately watch wrestling. I'm one and done kind of in this group. So you got nobody telling me nothing about nobody. Nobody knows nothing. So the announcers literally became my guidelines to things. I kind of had to learn when shows were coming on. I had to understand so I would wait till the end of the show. We'll be here Monday at 9:30 or Saturday at 6, whatever it was at that time. And so the voices of the announcers became kind of how I heard it. And one thing I understood after a while, that they change announcers every now and again. So it's just like when you hear a different voice, you hear that. You pay attention to that. And so I'm a big WCW fan. And, an hour in, they go from Bobby Heenan to maybe Tony Schiavone and Larry Zbyszko. It's just kind of the flip-flop. And you hear different voices in the announcers. But, that was the thing. You kind of learned how that was an intricate part of the show, too. Like that, they worked it in every time. It made the match sometimes. Sometimes they were selling the match that you couldn't understand how big it was at that moment until you seen how the announcers reacted. So, announcing is actually a real big part. Now, I never wanted to be an announcer. I got the body of a wrestler, but I live in Texas, so you got one thing that you're gonna do at this size: football. So it ain't no debating unless you go to a school that had a wrestling team and you were really good at wrestling and you got the win of the wrestling coach. But that wasn't my school. We didn't even have a wrestling team.
I mean, I don't know, George. A lot of big pro wrestling names out of Texas played football there first. Tito Santana, Ted DiBiase.
I lived down the street from Mark Henry.
Hey, man, all I'm saying is there's hope for you yet. I'm just saying, career renaissances happen at any age, buddy. I'm just saying, you want to get in the ring, man? We know a couple guys up here. Come and do a little bit of training up here in Canada. We'll get you ready.
You're the second person on a live show that's offered me a place to come train in Canada. I don't know. Man. Look, y'all looking for the
remember when Mark Henry got kicked out to Canada? You ever hear that story? How he was going to beat up Shawn Michaels, and they sent him to get trained by Leo Burke in Calgary. He babysat Owen Hart's kids.
All Canadians, all Canadian wrestling fans have a little bit of Stu Hart in them. So when we see a big boy like you, we just start rubbing our hands together. We're like, yeah, we can do something with that big bastard. Yeah.
Nah, it's good and done now. Look, if it was anything, I'd probably still be playing ball. But the
goddamn cold here too.
No.
Gotta respect that. But hey, can't blame me for trying.
Oh, yeah. I would love to. Yeah. Look, if I had the opportunity early, I would have definitely been in a good standing. I probably wouldn't give up on it because I liked it so much. The contact wasn't a problem. It was just trying to find out who I would be in that type of realm. Like, you never know. I might have been an announcer. I might have been a big stage guy. Like I might have been, whoever. A big job guy, whoever in that particular fold that I could have possibly have been. I don't know. I probably would have learned the business and did it because everybody explodes at some point.
Well, you're definitely finding your niche now, man. And hey,
Oh.
passionate fans are a big cornerstone of the business. So the fact that you're out here and spreading the good word, if you will, hey, just as important.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I
Yeah.
get to talking
So
now.
yeah, and so ladies and gentlemen, so Adam, let's kick it off. The first two names on this list, the top. Then we're talking play-by-play men, men or women, play-by-play, not color commentators, of course. So just so that we're clear. So who's the two on your list? Who we got? Who we kicking the list off with?
Well, let's rip the Band-Aid off right now because Jack, I was going to have this guy on the list, and I think everybody who knows me know this guy's going to be on the list. So let's talk about big guys like all of us, and the biggest guy, so big, in fact, they had to name him after an animal. Gorilla Monsoon is got to be the first guy I talk about because this guy was the voice of my childhood. Gorilla Monsoon was the first voice that I ever heard on a WWF pay-per-view back in the 80s, and that was a voice that carried me all the way until until the Monday Night Wars, essentially. What an incredible force of nature this guy was on the microphone. And earlier I had talked about guys that were sports broadcasters, and look, Gorilla Monsoon obviously knew what he was talking about as a former professional wrestler, which gave him a really unique position as a play-by-play guy, because you don't normally see that. Most of the time, former pro wrestlers get slotted into the position of color commentator for obvious reasons. They're not necessarily broadcasters in the more traditional sporting sense. They're not there. They're not usually great at, well, here's a great Sioux play, and now he's transitioning that into a butterfly, whatever. They're there to talk about how, oh man, that really hurts the back. And I can tell you because I worked Gino Marino back in 1963 and he did that thing to me. That's what those guys are there for. But Gorilla, what he did, and I think he did this not better than anyone else, but did it really well, was he served as the viewer avatar. So he was put in the position of, okay, if I am the fan watching at home, how were they supposed to feel watching this contest? And what he would do is he would then espouse to the fan, hey, this is why you should feel this way about these people. And he was the fan's fan. He was the guy that was on your side, feeling the way you would feel watching at home. And as a child watching professional wrestling, that was a wonderful introduction because it gave you somebody that you could trust while you were watching. There were pro wrestling is full of big, colorful characters, and all of them are vying for your attention. But at the end of the day, you knew, hey, if Gorilla Monsoon said it, I can trust Gorilla Monsoon because he's like me. And obviously his style and his delivery is very big and over the top because, as we said before, he's a former pro wrestler, so he understands that. And for all those reasons, I absolutely fell in love with the guy. And the fact that he was incredibly versatile when it comes to his partners as well. Whether you put him in there, Gorilla Monsoon is one of the only guys I know who could be in multiple lists for commentating duos because the guy just worked so good with everybody they put him with, whether that was Jesse Ventura, whether that was Bobby Heenan, whether that was Jim Ross, or even someone like a Randy Savage, right? Those are four very distinct personalities who all have different goals when they're broadcasting, but Gorilla managed to work with all of them. So, there's something about the guy who had presence and yet at the same time was incredibly down to earth that absolutely appealed to me. And I think just made him the best. So he's got to be the first guy and the top guy I talk about.
I'm going to go on this because George knows there's Gorilla is my guy. Gorilla's my guy. Always has been. He was
Always
with me.
Will be.
The first voice you heard was Gorilla's. He was such an authority figure. Because you didn't, even if you knew nothing about him, you knew he was an authority and somebody to be respected. And then the more you listen, the more you realize, oh, he was a wrestler. He knows what he's talking about. And just his way of describing the anatomy, like when the back of the head, the sternocleidomastoid protuberance, the back of the head for folks, like he just had such a way. And I mean, yes, he was over the top. He was, but that was part of his charm. He's told such a good story. And the multiple partners thing is why I put him as the top, because like you said, those guys, he was good with Roddy. One of my favorite and very underrated duo was Gene and Gorilla. Gene, like that, they were so good. Some of the matches they call were and they added to it because they were both kind of over the top flamboyant guys, but they worked together. But I think Gorilla just had such a position of authority. And I mean, he was the ultimate babyface, which it was like, as a kid, it was like, yes, it was Jesse trying to pull shit. And he was like, no. He would try and pull shit. He was like, no. And it was like, you were just waiting for Gorilla to choke the shit out of him. You're just like, at some point, Gorilla's going to choke this guy. It ain't going to be good. So I just love Gorilla. He just had such a way with words and that voice. He had such a very, very nice voice. They always say John Fresenda, I believe it is, who did the NFL film stuff, where the autumn wind is a raider, they called it the voice from God. And I'm like, for me, I'm not religious, but the voice from God for me is Gorilla Monsoon. He just had that voice, man, and he had authority, and the way he called matches, and he called so many big matches and did it so well. And for me, he's the best. For me, he's number one and always will be number one. So, and listen, I know there's other people another gentleman who'll probably be on the list who people think is number one, and I'm fine with that. But for me, Gorilla's, best of all time. George, any Gorilla Monsoon memories?
No, because you guys are old as dirt. But no, in this sense, like I said, when I first came around, it was like what, 94, 95, 96. So I didn't get a whole lot of Gorilla at all. And to get original Gorilla in real time versus watching it on the network is never going to be the same, because it's an expectation now.
Yeah.
But when you guys seen it, it was fresh and new. My opinions on certain, announcers that y'all are here tonight, y'all probably be like, why him? For me, it was just that these people told the story the best for me. Now, from what I know from Gorilla, from the clips that I've seen from Gorilla, what you guys talk about as a powerful force and that voice, yes, it was something about him that it was a presence. You can even see that in the picture. So it was like, not only was he a big guy, but he held himself that way, and he announced that way. He announced very small. It was like, to be honest, and I hate to compare people cross, but he's like the John Madden of wrestling.
That is a brilliant one-to-one comparison, George. Very honestly, well. I think that's an excellent comparison.
Very well. And you can kind of understand where other announcers kind of took his style and just made it their own, and it just kind of continues on after this point. So he was the John Madden. He was definitely that play-by-play announcer that you can easily say that he made it simple for people to watch. Not only if the match wasn't that good, you just wanted to hear him talk about it.
And I kind of had a bit of an epiphany while you were talking there, George, which made a lot of sense. The John Madden comparison just kind of broke my brain a little bit, because I thought, oh yeah, he's wrestling's uncle. That's what it is. Just like John Madden is like your uncle in football, who would welcome you there and made you feel like, oh yeah, okay. And I know, you said, George, you didn't have any family that were into pro wrestling, but that's how I was introduced into pro wrestling, with my family, specifically my uncle. So having that kind of uncle-y figure, that's even a word, it is now, welcome you into the fold like that. That's kind of the presence that Gorilla gave off. So there you go. George, you're just opening all kinds of doors to my mind here today. Well done. Thank you, sir.
Always willing to teach.
Yeah. Who's up next? Who's your second pick?
Well, we went a little classic with us fossils, as George was so keen to mention there.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to go a little bit more modern with my second one. And since we know Jack, it doesn't have it doesn't he's not a real countryman, as I've called him. He's the Benedict Arnold of Canada for the way that he's talked about our fellow countrymen on this show. So I want to talk about a guy that I think is one of the best today, and maybe doesn't get the recognition he deserves simply because he hasn't had the longevity of the career as others. But I want to talk about Mauro Ranallo, because that guy, I think, is one of the best combinations of quote unquote real sports broadcaster and passionate fan, because that is a guy who's, if I had to think of one word to describe Mauro Ranallo, it's passion. Nobody broadcasts pro wrestling with as much passion as Mauro Ranallo does. And we've talked about how the different roles that people play in pro wrestling are all important. And I think that Mauro demonstrates that a good broadcaster can elevate the product of whatever you're watching. Because if you look at his years broadcasting in NXT specifically and compare it to some of the other years and other broadcasters, nobody is more memorable for calls in NXT than Mauro Ranallo. Even some legendary broadcasters that they had working in that brand cannot touch a candle to Mauro Ranallo on that call. And I think that another thing that should count for something, maybe not in the world of pro wrestling to pro wrestling fans, but to me counts for something, is the fact that the guy is so multifaceted. Kickboxing, MMA, boxing, pro wrestling, no matter what the guy is doing, he is exceptional. The guy can go from different sports and not miss a beat. Scott D'Amore in the promotion for the recent Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling events have called Mauro Ranallo the best play-by-play announcer in combat sports today. And I'm hard pressed to agree with him. Or to disagree with him for that matter. He's really exceptional at what he does. And I think that there is just something about Mauro on the call that you get excited. You cannot but help feel his passion. That's what I mean. And that's the thing. I'm not even talking about the great catchphrases and whatnot, but the guy is just an incredible hybrid play-by-play guy. And I think he deserves some love. So if I'm going to pick only a couple of voices to listen to for the rest of my life for wrestling, he's on my list.
I can dig it.
Adam,
I totally dig it.
I disagree with the comments you made about how proud of a Canadian I am. However, I do love that you brought up Mauro. He is legit as it gets. He called Mayweather Pacquiao. He is as legit as it gets. And that's the one thing I think he brings is legitimacy. The fact that, like you said, he does work so many sports. Again, the voice of authority. Not in the same way like Gorilla is an uncle, more of a character. Mauro's a character, obviously, because he's got the great voice, that classic voice. You can hear the Canadian in it. Kareem, we'll get to him.
We'll get there.
But
we'll get there. I'm sure we will.
We'll definitely get there. Don't you worry.
But I just think he's just, like you said, he's just so passionate, and his calls are just, you just hear it in his voice. You could hear the passion. It's just when he raises octaves, he's just, he's a really, really great broadcaster. And one of the things George and I try and do is we like to bring up guys who may not be on everyone else's top 5 that maybe people don't recognize. And Mauro's a guy like that. So I'm proud he's on the list. And I'm proud he's Canadian, and, just you're right. A great, just an outstanding broadcaster. Definitely belongs on the top 5. 1,000% agree.
I'm not taking him out. So, I'm not going to take that.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
I
think, he's on the list. Unless we figure it out, but
I think he's not going to make, number 2, but he's definitely up there. So
Look,
He's
I'm
definitely on
not.
the
I'm
list.
not necessarily putting these in any particular order. I
Yeah.
think that would be an impossible task for someone like myself.
no. We're gonna wait to the end of the show to figure this out because at the end of the
Yeah.
day, we gotta build it. But that's what I'm saying. I don't know who's gonna make number one. I don't know who's gonna make number two. But we just like I say, we throwing them names out there to go ahead and give you guys what we actually
Oh.
are looking for because these are good announcers. Like you're probably gonna hear 4 more announcers that you're gonna be like that's number one, number two, number three. You're probably wrong. So one of these guys ain't gonna make the list. And I know for a fact that people are gonna be hurt. But
yeah, I mean, even in putting together my 5, I have a list of 11. So that goes to show.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, okay? Because I'm going to take over the show here for a second. I'm going to hijack this, and I want to turn over to George because I want to tell you something. And I feel terrible about this, but it's the truth. And when we're talking about my favorites,
Is your favorite?
on my list of 11, I only have one WCW announcer on the list. Right. And I know WCW is your jam, but I also know that when you're inviting someone like myself on the show, geography plays a role in this. And, you know, us Canadian boys, we didn't really get a lot of access to WCW unless you were someone like my grandmother who had cable and got TBS. So twice a week or twice a month, I'd go to my grandmother and I'd get to watch WCW Saturday night, or I'd go to the video store that stocked all the WCW pay-per-views and I would watch those. But my weekly exposure was to WWF program.
And that's a geographical thing. And I do apologize 100%. About that. And I don't, I'm not mad at you for only having one, because at the end of the day, if that's what you were exposed to, that's what you got. And at the same time, this person made the list. So 100%. They did something. So I can't say, oh, why don't you have this person? You didn't watch Monday nights like that. You wasn't watching Saturday nights like that. You wasn't on tap like me. And I obviously, for one reason and one reason only, is because I never found what channel WWE came on. And so it was literally that. Like, Ted Turner had some money. Ted Turner and them had some money. And even before they had some money, they still had the channel that you would see it and you would watch the replays like every night. Like, it was clockwork. So I was just like, if I missed it at this time, I was not able to watch it at another time. Never would happen with WWE like that. So
yeah, I was just kind of interested to know, like, who are some of your influences? Like, who would you put on the list as someone who grew up with a Ted Turner organization as your primary source of broadcasting?
Let's do it. Who's your pick? We have Morrow and we got Gorilla. Who's your pick?
Tony
Schiavone.
Tony don't get enough love for what he did when he was younger. Tony old can't always rock with Tony old. Everybody gets old to a point to where their style is not necessarily a style, but they're more or less reaching to kind of be something that they never been. And I feel like he's doing that a little bit now. So I love you, Tony, but it's like that family member you got to let grow up on their own. Like, yeah, he there. But at the same time, when Tony was younger in WCW, I'm gonna tell you right now, he had Monday nights rocking, and he was the only one there for 2 hours straight sometimes, simply because he could work with anybody they brought in, whether it be Heenan, whether it be
he wasn't good with Heenan.
Look, the thing about him being with Heenan, he didn't have to be good with Heenan because Heenan was good by himself, so it never made Tony look bad. Tony had to just be a float.
But Heenan, the thing with Heenan though is they wouldn't let Heenan be Heenan. And Tony cut him off a lot. That's one of the reasons. Like, I don't mind you put Tony on the list, and I get it. But that's one of the reasons. I wasn't a fan of his work with Heenan.
You don't get.
But he was great with. I will say this. I would put Tony on there because he did. I was a fan of his work with Jesse.
Yes,
he was good with Jesse.
Jesse was hilarious with him.
The next guy who was on the list wasn't good with Jesse, but Tony was good with Jesse because Tony sold with him. So I respect, and I get it. Like, obviously, he was the play-by-play announcer for WCW in the '90s. He kind of has to be on the list, so I understand.
I would also put another one.
I'm not as big a fan of Tony Schiavone.
I would put somebody else up there, but the thing is, I don't think he deserves to be in top 5 for this specific role. He was really good at it, because I feel like, at the time that he had to be good at it, he was, but it was a really short stint. But of
Okay.
course, that's Eric Bischoff, because
Oh,
Eric was,
no way. He was horrible.
in your opinion,
He's a horrible play-by-play announcer.
you watched the Leftovers. You didn't watch this live. And look, ruining a show in real time as a play-by-play announcer.
Listen, Tony Schiavone is great. Let's stick at Tony Schiavone. Eric Bischoff, he was a great GM, a great
That's
everything
why
else.
I say he was a good announcer, but he was great everywhere else. That's why I say you can put him in there, but he wouldn't make the top 5.
Yeah. No, I don't
You
think
got to
he
give
make the
people
top 10.
respect. Why wouldn't he?
Because I know Adam's got about 10. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people here who are better than Eric Bischoff.
In your opinion?
Yeah, in my opinion. And
Look,
but
you got to say that at the end of this, because at the end of the day, somebody somewhere, their list is totally different from what you could ever imagine. So, in your opinion, I got to say,
and Kareem's too. Kareem agrees with me. Anyway, Tony Schiavone, yes. I'm gonna go Jim Ross. I mean, it goes without saying.
absolutely.
So. Oh, Adam, you didn't get to speak on Tony Schiavone. Pardon me.
Well,
I was getting kind of
thanks.
heated there.
Yeah, no kidding. I kind of felt a little forgotten over here, but that's okay. You know what? I'll try to keep it as short and sweet as I can. You know what, George? Look, I'll say this. Tony Schiavone I think he is a good announcer. No question about it. And honestly,
he's good announcer.
I'll say this. I like his stuff now even better than his older stuff in WCW. I think Tony Schiavone is one of those broadcasters who has actually improved with age and has gotten better as he's gotten older and had a little bit more life experience. When I hear Tony Schiavone on the call today, I feel like I'm listening to a guy who has been in the business for a couple of decades and has kind of felt it throughout his life, throughout the years. And I like that about him quite a bit. I think that he has more of a sports broadcaster approach to it because that's who he is. He's also done lots of sports broadcasting for, say, the Georgia Bulldogs and other sports organizations. So he definitely brings an air of legitimacy to those broadcasts. So I absolutely understand why, and that absolutely fit the Turner organizations when he was on the call. Absolutely did. So I absolutely cannot fault you for that, especially since, as I said, Gorilla was the voice of my childhood. Look, that was a phrase coined by one Conrad Thompson, who used it specifically when referring to Tony Schiavone, the voice of our childhoods, because he was a WCW kid as well. And for a WCW kid, Tony Schiavone was the man. That's it. Yeah. And I absolutely get that.
No, I agree. He should be on the list. I'm telling you my opinion. He belongs on the list.
I'll also give him points because anybody who can sit next to Dusty Rhodes on commentary and not either die from laughter or make sense of what the hell the Dream was saying half the time, I mean, he deserves props. He deserves props. Much as I love the Dream, trust me, Dream would make my top 5 color guys just because, man, oh man, it doesn't matter if you knew what the hell he was talking about or not. I would listen to Dusty talk all damn day.
He meant that shit, boy.
On the topic of Eric Bischoff, I do have something I want to say about Eric Bischoff, which is this. Eric Bischoff, I think, is underrated as a broadcaster, but he is a very specific type of broadcaster. And ironically enough, or maybe poetically, if you're this kind of person, I categorize him in the same vein as Vince McMahon.
Thank you.
Which is that they are both hype men.
Multifaceted. They're hype men. Exactly. Okay.
Vince McMahon and Eric Bischoff were not interested in telling stories. They were not interested in calling moves.
Nope.
They were interested in getting you to stick around for 5 more minutes and keep watching the show and promote what's coming up next and just talk about how and convince you
they were
that
promoters.
They were trying to convince you.
They were more live promoters than play-by-play.
What you were watching was the greatest show on television right now, and don't you dare change that channel. both, Vince McMahon is a promoter. Eric Bischoff was in marketing before he got into broadcasting.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that if you're into that kind of style, because look, there are people I've talked to who think Vince McMahon is the best play-by-play guy of all time, because when they grew up watching him, they were into how much he sold things and how much like he got the product over. And I feel like Eric Bischoff falls into that same category. And I will definitely say for some, it may work better as a color guy. If I may switch sides for just a moment here and say, there's a lot of people I think today who feel like Don West was an overlooked part of the broadcasting team for TNA simply because he was so over the top and big, but that was his job. His job was a salesman, a hype guy. And look, you may think that that's a better position for a color guy. I can understand that, but I absolutely understand and see the value in it in a play-by-play as well. So look, Eric Bischoff will not make my top 5 anytime soon, because
I don't think he'll make the top 5.
Because that's not my style. That's not my style. But if that's your style, I think he's better than people give him credit for.
Also, to my opinion of Eric Bischoff as well. Like, I loved him as a promoter, as a podcaster. Like, genius. The guy's a genius. Like, as the rest, like, people can knock shit about him. Like, but here's the thing about Eric Bischoff when he does his podcast now that I respect. He comes from a position of authority. When he talks about promoting in the business of professional wrestling, there are a few people on the planet who have done it at as high level as him. There's like maybe 4 other people, maybe, when you look at the totality of the business. And that, like, I respect that. As a play-by-play announcer, it's funny you mentioned the Vince. I do understand where you're going. And when I started hearing Eric Bischoff, I was like 15, 16 years old. So maybe at the time I kind of outgrew him, but I love Vince. Like, I loved Vince as a play-by-play guy. Like, I just thought he was just, and then you watch his stuff back when he was like with Bruno, when he was doing it by himself. It was a lot different for Vince McMahon, and he was really good, but like, he might be on the list. But I understand what you're saying. I just was never a big fan of Eric Bischoff. George was, you were, that's great. So I'm going to bring up Jim Ross. Obviously, I think it's about time we talk about Jim Ross.
Yeah.
I think everybody here has had Jim Ross. Like, the voice of my childhood was Gorilla Monsoon. The voice that introduced me to wrestling was Gorilla. I will always put Gorilla number 1. However, the voice of my teenage years was Jim Ross. Like, because Jim just, Jim was the attitude. Like, I look at him for the Attitude Era. I really loved his WCW stint. I thought he was great with Paul Lee. I thought Paul Lee was his best broadcast partner in WCW. He didn't work well with Jesse. He just didn't sell, and he admits it. So there you go. I mean, he was good with Tone. He was good with Bob Caudle. He had a number of different partners he was good at, but like nothing like the King, just because it was like
the longevity.
They were characters. Like, they were just characters. Like, that's the thing. Like, Jim Ross is a legit announcer. Don't get me wrong. He's done sports and stuff. But he was old. He was JR. He was a character, cowboy hat. The kid wore a fucking crown. And it was just like, and you talk about passion. Ross had that passion. He just had it. Absolutely had it. So definitely Jim Ross. Gentlemen, have at it. I think Adam, George, who wants to go first about Jim Ross?
JR was another reason why I flipped the channel. When JR first started kind of talking, you can understand how much he loved the business. You can understand how much he talked about the business and how he was just easy flowing with it. And like you say, he worked well with everybody, but his relationship with King, like, they fed off of each other like they knew each other personally and hated each other personally in a sense and loved each other at the same time. So it was just like he had relationships on TV with people that kind of made wrestling easier to watch. I would always say calling a match is not always the easiest, especially when you get put in certain situations. I thank JR for that, really, because in my mind, I still didn't know until they announced it that Owen had passed. But JR handled that so well in the time that he had to handle it. I feel like that's probably one of the best announcing moments, which is probably one of the weirdest things to say. But to be caught on the fly by something so tragic and understand how you have to relate this back to people who are listening
Yeah.
and be the person to have to do it. You just have to tell you have to tell the world something that they probably not gonna want to hear. So
Yeah.
he was a good announcer, but I think his timing and emotion was always on point, and that's
Yeah.
what he got put into a lot of times.
I think that is the special skill of Jim Ross, is that he always had the right call for the moment.
Exactly.
And he was able to innately understand the moment he was in, and he was able to express that in a way that you as a viewer at home understood completely. If you did not understand what was happening, if you could not understand what you were watching, you would at least understand what you were feeling by what Jim Ross was saying, because he was us. Jim Ross, I think, was one of those.
Yep.
More relatable.
He absolutely
He was a fan.
And yes,
He was a fan.
although I don't think he was the first guy to ever do that, I'm going to talk about that person probably a little bit later. But I think that he was certainly the first mainstream of the wrestling broadcasters to really understand the balance between sports broadcaster and passionate fan.
Exactly.
And don't get me wrong, I mess with his Mid-South stuff, and I really mess with his early WCW stuff, which is when you kind of started to see it. But I think we can all agree it hit its zenith and its apex during those Attitude Era days in the WWF. Not so much a fan of his work now, but I think that guy has earned more than his fair share, a lifetime of free passes with the number of memorable calls he has made. I think we can all agree that there is no broadcaster in the history of professional wrestling with more memorable calls than Jim Ross.
No.
That is a guy that he is literally a quotable broadcaster. And there are so few of those in the world of professional wrestling. Don't get me wrong. Like guys like your Tony Schiavone's, guys like your Mauro Ranaros, they've had catchphrases and they have had memorable calls, but
nobody
has had as many calls that you hear and instantly remember than Jim Ross. If I say, my God, he's broken in half, you know what match I'm talking about. You know what match I'm talking about. You know the moment I'm talking about immediately. You hear, if I say, go on, kid, make yourself famous, you know the moment I'm talking about, right? If you say, oh my God, Austin has made a deal with the devil, you know the moment. And that's because of Jim Ross.
I just really went down memory lane with you. Jim Ross did exactly that. Tell that story.
Nobody was better with a soundbite than Jim Ross in his broadcaster. Like
Jim Ross made moments as much as the wrestlers in the ring. Jim Ross made moments. And man, for a broadcaster, that's tough to do. And he did it consistently.
And he was as over as almost any wrestler. Like there's nobody on the show more over than Jim Ross. So he really had it.
When AEW was formed, like him or hate him, when AEW was formed, right? Who were the big names that they were touting in that original press conference? Yeah, the Bucks, Omega, Cody, those were all the indie guys. But the two names everyone was talking about were Chris Jericho, top wrestler, big name wrestler, and hey, we got Jim Ross. JR is going to be our broadcast guy, right? That was huge, man. And so when you can hang your hat on that, you got some juice. And believe me, much like the juicy, fruity, delicious, juicy, fruity, delicious Skittles that he was sometimes forced to promote, Jim Ross got the juice, if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The only thing about his commentary today, it just seems he doesn't fit. It's just like he's like a piece that doesn't belong in there. It's like he's a sore thumb right now, and it's not a good one.
Yeah,
I agree. But what I'm saying is that for anybody else, they would have put him out to pasture. But it's Jim Ross. They're know what? JR gets a forever pass because the dude is a legend.
Here's your retirement.
In a way, in a way that nobody else in the business has ever been. So you get a pass, old
deserves it,
man.
yeah.
You're good.
Some voices you want to hear until you can't hear them anymore. So
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah.
I'll take that.
So, gentlemen, that leaves us with number 5 on the list. And I mean, we have so many great broadcasters. I'd like to throw a couple names out for discussion. If I got 3 names I'd like to throw out. There's a few though. I kind of want to throw out a couple of these names. Michael Cole is one. You know, I really don't think that guy gets the credit he deserves for as good as he is. I think he was always people always looked at JR and was like, you know, but like, I mean, the Finish the Story call is one of the greatest of all time. Like, you want to talk about having the moment and like just seizing it. And the work he's been doing over the last few years, especially with McAfee, like he found his guy with McAfee. He had a number of different partners and different things. But I look at Michael Cole's maybe a guy who definitely I don't think gets the credit he deserves. I mean, he's the modern voice of WWE. Like I think he's grown. Like when he was younger, even when he was like took over for JR for that first few months of '99, he wasn't bad. And everyone's always kind of like, oh, Michael, like I guess in the years of like the Cena years, it kind of got a bit corporate because, you know, but you see him now, like, because he didn't have Vince McMahon screaming in his ear when he's on SmackDown. They did the commentary afterwards. He had Paul Heyman screaming in his ear. But when you have Vince McMahon screaming in his ear, it was probably rough for any guy. But now that you see that, like, he's kind of running his own deal, I mean, like, that guy's good, man. That guy's got a good voice. I really like him, and I don't think he gets enough credit. So I'll put him up there. And I don't know if people think he's, like, I think he's a top 5 worthy guy. I mean,
absolutely. I got him.
You know, I just, you know, like the other ones I have, just so we have some context, Adam, before you go, but you could talk about these guys. You mentioned Vince McMahon. I mean, Vince, you know, like I know, you know, he was a great play-by-play guy. Mike Tenay was another guy I had on the list.
Yeah.
I thought his work in TNA was really, really good and doesn't get it. You know, like I thought Mike was always he was always first class. He brought a professionalism and a level of knowledge too, like the real, like you could really tell that he was like an avid watcher and researcher of wrestling. So those are the 3 names, Adam. Anyone stick out? You tell me, man. What do we?
Well, I'll first address Michael Cole. And look, in 10 years, when podcasts are being done by other kids and, you know, they're implemented straight into our brains and, you know, the future is far beyond anything we can imagine. They'll be talking about Michael Cole the same way, Jack, you and I are talking about Gorilla, and George, the way you're talking about Tony Schiavone, and how others are talking about Jim Ross, because he has been the voice of the WWE for an entire generation of people now. And I also agree that he is worth considering on this list simply for A, his longevity, and I would say B, his adaptability. The guy has called the WWE's action over a few decades now. And if you even look at how the product itself has changed over time, to be the voice of one company so consistently for decades, right? That takes talent and that takes a lot of hard work. And he's done it. So I think for that alone, the guy has got to get some respect, and you got to recognize, you know, game recognized game, right? Like, I mean, and if I may, do you mind if I tell a personal Michael Cole story?
Absolutely.
Okay. Get it.
So back in 2002, I had the pleasure of attending the WWF Fan Access Week in the lead up to WrestleMania 18 in Toronto. And one of my favorite memories of the event was running into Michael Cole, not at a fan meet and greet, just ran into him on the full exhibition floor while I was walking around, and getting the opportunity to have about a 5-6 minute conversation with him. And we didn't talk wrestling. Actually, the thing I was most interested in talking to him about was his time covering the Gulf War because he was a CBS news correspondent before working in the WWF. And you could not have talked to a more genuine, down-to-earth human being than in that conversation that I had with one Michael Cole. It has been an absolute pleasure to see more of that person be allowed to broadcast on WWE programming in the last few years. And I think that since we have been allowed to see more of the genuine person that Michael Cole is, his game has been stepped up to a whole other level. So I absolutely have no issue whatsoever putting Michael Cole on that list. As for Mike Tenay, sorry, George, I don't want to break your heart here, but he was the guy. He was the WCW guy on my list. And honestly,
I'm not mad about that either. I'm not mad about that because he was a little bit more consistent at times. But like I say, Tony was more of the voice that you heard. Mike Tenay was probably a better play-by-play guy. He just wasn't vocally as impactful as Tony.
Well, I think it comes down to style, right? Because Mike Tenay was originally brought in as the luchador expert, right? He was the guy that gave you all the background on all these guys that you had no idea who they were, and you weren't going to learn who they were through
a lot of
promos.
the mid-card matches,
yeah, because these guys didn't speak English, so you weren't going to know who they were through promos. So you had Mike Tenay in there to make you sure that you understand this other world, right? So he brought that, again, sports broadcaster delivery. He was these are the facts. He was very Joe Friday. Just the facts, ma'am. Just Georgia, you probably won't get that reference. You're not old like Jack and myself, but you know, it was very just the facts, ma'am. Just the facts. His TNA stuff allowed his personality to come out a little bit more. And then we got to see more of the fan of Mike Tenay. Although I would say he fit more into the Gorilla Monsoon role there, more so than say like the Mauro Ranallo or the Jim Ross. He certainly was passionate, but I think that he took on more of the avatar role of like, I'm playing the role of the fan here doing the broadcasting, which I understand some people found grating. I found it charming. But comparing the two, one or the other for the list, hurts me to say it as a TNA fan because TNA is my jam. But I got to give it to Michael Cole. I think I would give him the edge over Tenay in that situation. But there is a name that you didn't mention that I would like to throw into the ring, if you don't mind.
Yes.
I would like to bring up the name Joey Styles because Joey, I think, oftentimes gets forgotten because he worked
lost in the shuffle. He gets lost in the shuffle a lot.
Because he worked for the smaller companies and whatnot. But look, the fact of the matter is that there wasn't anybody since, well, I'll bring up his name now because he was a name I wanted to put on my list, but I know he's not going to make the top 5. There hasn't been a guy since Lance Russell, the great Lance Russell from Memphis Wrestling, who was able to carry a show like that all on his own without a color guy. Now, he could work really well with color guys. All you had to do was look at his work with Don Callis or even Joel Gertner. No matter who he was put in there with, he could adapt. But the fact of the matter is the guy could carry an entire broadcast on his own shoulders. And there was something that was said about him years ago that stuck with me as like a moment, which is that ECW fans trusted Joey Styles. And there is absolute truth to that statement because if you look at Joey Styles, he makes 0 sense in ECW. You have this kind of small, nerdish looking dude talking about, pro wrestling in a way. You're like this guy is your friend's nerdy brother. What the heck is he doing calling the action in a blood and guts company like this? And yet ECW fans were like, that's my man right there. That's the guy right there. Joey Styles was cool in ECW. Yeah. What? Yeah. How does that even happen, right? Yeah. But there's something about the way he calls the action. Again, that mix of that sports broadcaster and passion that made you instantly trust him, that made you realize, oh, damn, he's one of us. He's one of us. He was the fan that like was now he might not have been the wild Philly fan that had the crazy hair and the tattoos and that looked like a biker you'd find at a bar on a Saturday.
No.
He was probably more like, that internet fan who was sitting in his basement watching wrestling and being like, man, wouldn't it be cool to like hang around with these guys? And that was Joey Styles. But I'm saying he took that and he built a foundation of trust with wrestling fans so that when he said something, we believed it. And that was the thing I think that made Joey Styles really special. And yes, he absolutely had his catchphrases. The "Oh my God," of course, probably one of the most famous broadcaster play-by-play catchphrases in all of pro wrestling. But he was another guy that was multifaceted, understood when to be the hype man, understood when to be the storyteller, understood when to call the moves and make it about sport, and understood when to be the fan. And few guys were as well-rounded of a play-by-play guy as Joey Styles. So that's why I want to throw his microphone in the ring, if you will.
That was a great. I like Joey. He also brought a very journalistic approach, and I knew he had a journalism background. So, being a journalist myself, I got that with him. Personally, though, I still lean Michael Cole. I just think Michael Cole's longevity and his, but Joey, again, like in all that chaos, you had this, like you said, this very straight-laced. He was the great straight man, and like Joey jumped on people, but nobody ever beat up Joey. That must have been like an old school thing that Paul E learned, because like Joey jumped on a few guys, but nobody ever hit Joey, punched Joey, touched Joey. So it was like, even in all that chaos, he was kind of, untouchable. But I love that I love that you brought him up. He deserves to be brought up. So probably for me on the honorable mentions list, but I would lean more Michael Cole.
Well, it sounds like we got a tie here, and we still haven't heard from George about whether he thinks it should be Cole, whether it should be Styles, or hey, maybe he's got somebody in his back pocket that we're not even thinking of.
Yeah.
So George, I want to hear what you have to say.
On this particular subject, guys, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I don't bring anything extra to the table at this point. You guys have made very valid points between Michael Cole, Joey Styles. My thing with Joey Styles is you don't really know if he can do it with more than one person. And that's one of the characteristics that all the other announcers on this list actually has. Michael Cole has done it for decades with different people. Like you said, he's adapted in every genre there was. He was in the Attitude Era working that too. He was in that Ruthless Aggression era working that. And the new eras that came after. He worked the COVID year that was really, really weird with no crowd. So throughout all that and still being able to kind of adapt and change with that destroys Joey Styles, no lie. It kind of is like a Pac-Man pepper. Like it was a good try. You threw it out there, but he ate that shit. So it's like you can't throw him in there with that.
Didn't like it as much as the John Madden comparison, but I'll buy it.
Yeah, nah. He ate that shit. It was good. It was good. Like the thing about Joey Styles is he is a very underrated announcer due to the fact that he was in ECW. That is one of the things that was his only knock. Is because when he had his opportunity in WWE, they paired him with the one person that he probably couldn't stand the most. And then it blew up right there on live TV. And we'll never get to see Joey Styles ever again talk about anything else but that particular moment, simply because that was the big fallout on the big company. But you really don't pay attention to how good Joey Styles was before that. So,
but I'll say this about Joey: his the performance at One Night Stand was outstanding. Absolutely. It was probably the best in his career. Like, it was really, really good. Like, he really fit in there. I mean, if they had just taken what that show was and put it on Sci-Fi, it would have been a success. Because people still crave it. That wasn't Joey's fault that the show sucked. I mean, I don't think Joey really he didn't do well as when he got thrown in the fire as the lead Raw announcer. I think he needed to develop a bit more into the WWE style. But for what he did in ECW, I definitely think he belongs for sure on the honorable mentions list, because that's got Tenay and Joey Styles on it. So But before we get there, gentlemen, let's rank these guys. We have 5 on the list right now: Gorilla Monsoon, Mo Ronaldo, Tony Schiavone, Jim Ross, and Michael Cole. I think that's the definitive list. And there's one other name that I will mention, but here's why I don't think he'll be on our list: is Gordon Soley, because we never experienced him live. I think that's the only thing. I think probably definitely an honorable mention. Like, he was the guy for decades. Like, he was the man. And I mean, his stuff with Jim Ross that he did later, but his old school stuff, I love. But I was like, that's one person that people will say, "Oh, you forgot Soley." Well, it's like, well, we never really saw him, right? Like, for our generation, these are probably the guys, that we got right here. Is these 5? So who's like number 5? Who's number 5 on this list?
I'll take the bullet right now and say Morrow's number 5. Like, he's great, and he was the second name I mentioned. But look, comparing him to this list of 5 that we got, like, he's a guy that's still building his legacy right now. Talk to me in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, maybe it would be different. But I don't have any issue saying Morrow's, at the bottom of the best. Like, I still think that's a pretty damn good spot for a guy that,
he's outstanding
comparatively. So, but yeah, I think it's pretty easy to say Morrow's number 5.
Just a wonderful British Columbia boy.
No arguments there.
I like that. I think that's a good spot.
Now, this is where it gets interesting.
Who's 4?
Well, not for me. I'm going Tony Schiavone.
I'll agree with that as well. So far we're all on the same page right now. I think that I'm very comfortable with Tony at 4. I think that that's an absolutely good place for him. 100%.
I think the rest of the list is automatic at this point. I think we're all going to agree.
Michael
Cole, JR, and Gorilla.
Okay. You're gonna put Gorilla number 1.
Yeah.
I am shocked.
Who gives a shit?
I am shocked.
Why Gorilla? Why Gorilla over JR? Because most people pick JR, and I was prepared to have JR number 1 because that's what people would expect. For me, it's always been Gorilla.
Yeah.
Troy Aikman ain't better than John Madden, and that's just always going to be the thing.
Can I make a confession? Yeah. I don't watch football. I don't watch sports unless it's men and women in their underwear pretending to fight. But I'll say this: every analogy you've worked out today absolutely hits home with me. George, you are the MVP of this episode. Fantastic, man.
Look, don't worry. Look, number 1 is always going to be number 1. That's the thing. That's how it works. It's just not going to stop. Like, the amount of people that could come and say Gorilla influenced them, then this list starts. Because that's Gorilla was it's like I say, John Madden was that one, and everybody else kind of picked off him. So yeah, that's how you got to do it. And now we got 50 other announcers who are trying to do their own thing. You're bringing in people who know the game. Back then, it was just people who were announcers. I would say Joe Buck is a legacy announcer at this particular point, simply because he's just been in the game that long. It's a family legacy. But everybody else is one of those, I used to play the game. You got Tom Brady, Greg Olson. You got, all these former players that are kind of playing. So with, wrestling announcers, it's kind of the same. You got Gorilla Monsoon and everybody else. JR is like, and you can go with basketball. You got Michael Jordan and everybody else in somebody's opinion. So it's just like, this is kind of how it goes in the wrestling announcing world. You got Gorilla Monsoon, then you got people would probably claw me in the throat if they see me in public over JR being number 2. But guess what, people? Somebody had to be better someday.
I think it really comes down to those 3 names in the top 3.
Exactly.
Are all going to be in different positions, and I think it's all going to be about generational. I think it really, what it comes down to is, who did you grow up with? And for guys like me and Jack, it's always going to be Gorilla. For others, it's always going to be JR. And for, again, this generation now that's coming up, they're going to listen back to this when they can access it in their brains and say, what were those guys smoking to not recognize the greatness of the greatest of all time, Michael Cole? It is absolutely generational, I think. And I think that's the difference between subjective and objective. Because if you're being objective, I might put Gorilla at 3 and put Cole and JR at 2 and 1. But if I'm being subjective, Gorilla's number 1 with a bullet all day, every day for me personally, and it's because he was the voice of my childhood. To bring it back to the beginning and to have the snake eat its own tail, if you will.
Yeah, he was the first. Like, I think it's really the first voice you hear, because like you talk to maybe a guy like Jim Cornette. I mean, he'll say Jim Ross, so he'll think we're nuts, but like the first voice, Lance Russell, like ranks high on his list because that was the voice he heard as a kid. So I think, yeah, it's like, I think that's why. And you're sitting here with two old codgers, V and you, who grew up in, WWF heyday in Toronto. So it was like, yeah, Gorilla's going to be the best.
Lance Russell would make my personal top 5. So there you go. That's how that goes to show how old school leaning I am.
Hey,
George, hit me with an honorable mention. Give me an honorable mention. We got Styles and Tenay are already on the list because we talked about for the top 5 that they just a little bit short. But who's an honorable mention?
I don't want to say this because it's embarrassing that I like this person.
Oh, okay. Now you have to say it.
Mark Madden.
No, he's color. He doesn't count.
As a play-by-play guy?
He didn't do play-by-play. He
didn't do a lot of play-by-play. He did play-by-play a couple times, but he was more color anyway. He was very entertaining.
Yeah, he was a color guy.
But he was a color guy.
You like Mark Madden?
I love Mark Madden. Mark Madden's hilarious.
I wasn't a big fan. I wasn't a big fan. I never got it.
You gotta look. See, some people's jokes you gotta read between the lines and know where they come from. And
well, I did. I wasn't like I did. I just But that's fun. But I don't think he'd be on this list, George, because I don't think he's a play-by-play guy. So we're talking play-by-play.
Here's what I'll say about Mark Madden is that sometimes a dumpster fire is endearing. And by that, I mean that I will also... Okay, remember earlier how I said I couldn't understand a damn thing that Dusty Rhodes was saying when he was like doing color commentary?
Yeah.
And yet that's what made him endearing and charming to me.
Mark Madden.
Exactly. Again, generational.
Yeah.
Mark Madden was hilarious. It was just the way he, delivered his punchlines for me. It just kind of came naturally to him to be just a natural born idiot. Like it was just entertaining. I'm sorry. I love Mark Madden. But he wouldn't make this.
Do you have another play-by-play guy? You got another play-by-play guy?
No, actually, I don't. Because I don't think anybody else deserves the list.
These are honorable mentions. So I know Adam does. So Adam, give me another honorable mention.
I absolutely do. You know what? I am going to shout out someone that is broadcasting now. He's a modern guy, but I think that he oftentimes gets overlooked in the conversation, similarly to Joey Styles, because he works for small organizations. But for my money and my personal tastes, Ian Riccaboni is my favorite play-by-play announcer today. That guy, there is something about his presentation, his passion, and his approach to broadcasting, and again, that sports broadcaster style, that I think makes him so undervalued and underappreciated by the wrestling public. And if you haven't heard his stuff, I highly recommend just go watch a couple of videos of Ring of Honor and his work, especially if he's doing anything with Caprice Coleman. I think those two are a fantastic duo. They have great chemistry together. And I think he's really overlooked. So I just wanted to shout out Ian Riccaboni right now because I don't think he gets enough love. So I wanted to show him a little bit on the episode. I could do more, but if you just want one to start, that's the guy I want to kick it off with because I want to make sure he gets some love.
I'm going to mention this, and George is going to have no idea. I'll mention one coming up. George will have no idea. So, but I got to throw him out there. And Adam, you call me a bad Canadian. I got to put Ed Whalen on the goddamn list because You want to talk about dumpster fires being endearing? Ed Whalen was so Canadian. It was great. Where he got a malfunction at the junction. Sometimes you didn't understand what he was saying. And like we got Ed up here, like I got it. I remember Stampede, I think it was on TSN, and he was doing it, and he was just had this. We'll call it stand. It's just high, whiny, almost voice, but it was just like he had an endearing quality. He was just again that uncle type thing. He was Uncle Ed, and so George, you probably have no idea who Ed Whalen is, do you?
Absolutely not.
There's a reason.
Ed Whalen was the voice of Stampede Wrestling, the Hart promotion. So he was and he also did hockey in Calgary, and so this is a very Canadian slanted list, and we apologize to our American friends. But
I apologize for nothing.
Yeah, I apologize for nothing. Okay.
Hey, nothing wrong with being proud of where you come from, man. Look,
not at all.
We have one Canadian on the list, all right? I think that's more than fair.
2 out of 10. We got Ed Whalen on the honorable mentions list. And Adam, I'll let you have the last ones. You have one more to put on for the honorable mention.
Ooh, that's tough. There's really 2 names I wanted to mention, but you know what? I think I'll go with the more interesting one. I want to mention this guy simply because he really only worked in one, I'll say 2, but in particular one setting, but he worked really, really well in it. And I want to shout out Matt Striker specifically for his work in Lucha Underground. Now, as I said, I'm an Impact TNA guy, and I like the work that he did there. I thought he was great. However, I think Lucha Underground is the only place where Matt Striker could have gotten over and excelled the way that he did with who he did. Again, while we're on the subject of dumpster fires, right? Vampiro as a color commentator was a dumpster fire. But my God, him and Striker together, I don't know what it was, but them in that chaotic setting, it worked. There was something about them that made them entertaining. And I think that's why I wanted to bring them up for this particular honorable mention, because of everything that we've talked about today, there is a style that was really only done in that promotion, which was just pure entertainment. These were guys that weren't trying to be fan avatars. These were guys that were not trying to be broadcasters calling moves and presenting it like sport. They were literally just there to entertain you on the call. And so few play-by-play announcers can do that because simply they cannot perform it in the environment in which they are tasked to do so. You could not get away with that in WCW. And besides, you already had that. His name was Dusty Rhodes, and he was doing color with you. You couldn't do that in the WWF because you already had that with Jerry Lawler. It was essentially 2 color guys working together, both trying to do the job of one another at the same time. And you know what? It was a train wreck. It was a dumpster fire. It was whatever you want to call it. But it worked. And it was entertaining to the very end. So again, he is an honorable mention because only in the circumstances in which he was presented specifically in Lucha Underground was Matt Striker great. But man, he was great in that very specific situation.
Fair. Definitely fair.
Well, it's good. Yeah, okay. All right, fine. Fair enough.
You look,
I like it. I like
it. It's not a bad one due to the fact that, we know how bad Vampiro was on the mic. Yeah. And that was like, man, look, if you can carry that guy for the longevity of a show or even a match is probably more points than you actually can help out. Like that, sometimes because did you hear it? I know you heard it at least once. And there's some clips. I'm pretty sure you were like, yeah, cut this shit off. Like, but that's the
But they kept it in.
Exactly. But Striker made it that much better. So I give you that because I remember that. I tapped into TNA a couple times and I'm like, okay,
He was good in TNA, but not It's a much
Not as
different
good.
environment.
I like
The
Lucha Underground.
environment really made
Yeah,
it, man.
not as good as where he is.
That show was different too. It was unique.
Yeah,
Oh.
absolutely. You
George, you
have to
watched
I
kinda-
like how they did the
Underground,
back.
right?
I watched it a couple times.
Oh man, it's a
Yeah.
special show.
I like how
man.
they
I
did
think
the-
it's cool.
The
so
the
cool.
backstage
I love a
vignettes.
good. Yeah,
It
I
was
like
like shot like a movie.
Yeah.
I like the. I like.
It's
I like
different.
the camera angles that they kind of use in that one.
as
Yeah,
the kids
it was
would
different.
say, it hits different. George, do kids still say that? I don't know. Old man.
I don't
over
got kids. Oh, fuck them. Hell no. I don't got no kids.
Before we end off, I want to mention a couple things. We talk about Gorilla. I want a couple of great broadcast teams that you never thought would be good, but like that worked. And one was it was the only time with SummerSlam '91 was Gorilla, Bobby, and Roddy Piper. Like, and it was brilliant. It was because Gorilla played this traffic cop because Piper and like. I think it was the line where Bobby hit the line. He's like, his lunch came home. No, that was Jameson. But he said, Piper come home, find out his parents had moved. And he was like, you could tell. And Gorilla was just like the trap cop. It was a great one. And then you mentioned Dusty Rhodes. I recently watched Sold Out, and it was an 8-man lucha match that opened that show. And it was Tony Schiavone, Bobby the Brain Heenan, Dusty Rhodes, and Mike Tenay. And like Tenay was the only person you understood anything. Like Bobby was just, I don't know what Tony was trying to cut off Bobby. Dusty was like, who the fuck? Dusty was like, what am I watching? Like, this is insane. It was
I'm gonna have to watch
hilarious.
it.
So,
I'm gonna have to watch that tonight because that shit sounds entertaining. Like the cast just.
it's
Yeah, I'm gonna
funny.
go
And
watch
the
this.
match was a train wreck. The match is like a four,
Absolutely.
like 8-man lucha match. So it was like insane. And then you have Mike Tenay trying to describe it with Dusty Rhodes. It was like I just love how Dusty would make up words. Like just make it was like fuck it, it's a word now. Dusty said it. Like it was just hilarious. It was just like you're right. He was an authority because he was a world champion. Like he was Dusty Rhodes. He had an authority anyway. So he could like you say, like he could say whatever he wanted. It didn't really matter. But that night was funny because it was like these 4 guys in a booth and this crazy ass lucha match, which was a great match, by the way. One of my favorite pay-per-views was Sold Out '98. Very, very underrated. Anyway, those are a couple, gentlemen. But Adam, thank you so much for joining us. Like, what a great show.
Hey,
Like,
thanks for having
really
me.
brought
man.
it like no problem. Like I really like the you really understand broadcasting, obviously you can tell. And like just the names are more modern, like Rick Abani, like I've heard a bit of his stuff, so I'm not really an expert. What I do hear is very good, and like people, speak highly of him, of course. So like, and he belongs on the list, but like I think we got a diverse list, and I think we got the generational talents really that are in professional wrestling broadcasting. So Adam, thanks for the help with the list. We appreciate it. And
Hey, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. If I may plug real quick here before I go, I just want to say once again, if you have not given my work a chance, you can actually do so over at rocksolidfanclub.ca. We're going to give you all of the best of Rock Solid Wrestling that has to offer, and it is the best in Canada. I'm a little bit, biased, but hey, whatever. And I would also encourage anyone who happens to be in Jack's, part of the woods, to go and check out Anarchy and Angus this Saturday at the Angus Recreation Complex or Community Center Arena, I believe it is. Great, fantastic show headlined by a lumberjack match for the Canadian heavyweight title. Scotty the Body defending against Tornado, the Old Dirty Master. It should be an excellent, excellent showing. I will be there yelling wrestlers' names into a microphone very loudly as they make their way onto the ring. So keep your eyes out for that. But again, rocksolidfanclub.ca, or if you want to visit our general website, rocksolidpro.ca, will give you all the details there as well. Okay, I'm done shilling. Thank you.
Adam, thank you very much. We're gonna get you out of here. George and I are gonna finish up, but we appreciate your time. We appreciate you having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Peace.
have a good one, man. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Adam. Adam is unbelievable. You
Great
want to talk
job.
about a guy who's he's so good and he's so passionate and he does such a great job for us there, obviously. So I was happy to have him, and I thought he had like just the names he brought up. It's like, yeah, that's right, that guy should be there. So, but George, I guess we should announce that we're on a 2-week hiatus. This is our last show for a couple of weeks, right?
Whew. You know what?
Because we're going to Kansas City.
We going down to
Kansas City. Here we come.
We're going having a good time watching the Chiefs versus the Bucks, and then that Saturday before, we'll actually be in Nebraska, seeing Dylan Raiola play UCLA, which will actually be another good time as well. So,
yeah,
it's gonna be a weekend to remember. The football extravaganza, like I like to call it.
Yeah, so we're gonna take a couple weeks, just because I'm getting ready. I have a few things next week. It's a busy schedule, and then when I come back the Tuesday. Oh, sorry, Adam. I didn't mean to add you there.
Whoopsie.
Have a good.
Not a Mortal Kombat whoopsie moment.
Yeah. Fast fingers, man. I do it, fast fingers. Yes, Kareem. Kareem's coming. Kareem's going to be it's going to be amazing. So we're going to take a couple weeks, but let us know what you want to hear us talk about. I mean, I'm fortunate. I'm in wrestling, so I have so many cool people I'm interested in who I can access and we can bring on. But let us know what topics you want us to talk about. And if there's anyone out there who wants to talk wrestling with us, please let us know. We're we love doing this. This is, for me, it's such a great release to talk about wrestling, because it's the thing I've loved since I was a child. So, and I love the format we're doing. So let us know, man. Let us know. And people are tuning in, and we appreciate it so much.
We're here and hot, man. We're here and hot. I think
thank God he wasn't.
That'd have been a weird moment.
Jesus, Kareem. God.
The wildest rock solid promotion ever.
We might have went viral.
Oh my God, that'd have been terrible. But like I say, we're going on a 2-week hiatus, but we definitely will be back with some great wrestling content. We will definitely come back to you with some good stuff. Possibly a good recap of what we did in Kansas City, of course, how the game was, give you a little football recap that week potentially, and just kind of wrap it all up. But at the same time, we definitely don't want to leave you guys dry for too long. So like I say, 2 weeks is the top as far as we'll be back. Like I say, while we're gone, if you have some ideas for a top 5 list that you would like to do, or if you want to be a guest on the top 5, go ahead and throw your name in the hat and see if you can hang with the big dogs one weekend. I think that's an opportunity for whoever wants to come. And look, we like friendly debates. We see us have them all the time. We're not gonna go at your neck about it. If you don't like something, that's cool. Like I say, that's your opinion. You got that. I can't take that away from you. So, like I say, if you want to put your name in the hat, come on the show and definitely kind of talk some wrestling with us one week, definitely do so. We'll definitely make the accommodations for everybody to work well that week. But of course, like I say, we're here to have fun and talk wrestling. So come along and talk.
Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna head out. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks again, Adam. It's been unbelievable. But we're gonna get out of here. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night. Peace.